be smart. There's nothing like the infantry. You're in a plane and you get hit. What happened? You still gotta fall. 2 strikes against you. You're in a ship, get hit, you can still drown. In a tank, you can fry like an egg. But in the infantry, you get hit, and that's it. One thing or the other, you're dead or alive, but you're on the ground. Get wise. Nothing like the infantry.
The Steel Helmet is a rough and ready, meat and potatoes type of war movie. And even though it clocks in at a lean 85 minutes, it is dense with texture and subversive depth. Okay, maybe it's not so surprising that Samuel Fuller used the setting of the then ongoing Korean War to explore, among other things, the hypocrisy of Jim Crow and Japanese internment in the wake of the integration of the military. After all, 2 years later, he'd make the sharply cynical Cold War thriller Pick Up on South Street, at the height of Red Scare paranoia. Much like the pickpocket in that movie, Gene Evans's salty Sergeant Zack is the embodiment of a fractured masculinity in post-World War II America. A man who emerged from the war, not empowered or triumphant, but further embittered and cynical by the New World Order. Yet he still fights on, almost out of spite. However, that hardened shell is threatened by a chance encounter with an orphan Korean boy named Short Round. Together, along with a diverse ragtag group of infantry stragglers, take up position inside an abandoned Buddhist temple. Initially, I was concerned that the short running time would not give enough room to flesh out each member of the squad. And yeah, what I would have loved an extra 15 to 30 minutes to see these soldiers bounce off each other in repose, I was nevertheless pulled in by each and every one of them by the climactic battle. Most notably are Richard Liu and James Edwards as a Japanese-American sergeant and black medic. They are confronted by a North Korean POW for their continued service to a country that has treated them like second-class citizens. Their reactions are telling, because it's a contradiction they've both grappled with through 2 wars.
I surprise you. They threw Japanese Americans into prison camps in the last war, didn't they? Perhaps even your parents. Perhaps even you.
You rang the bell that time. They did.
Were you one of those idiots who fought in Europe for your country?
442nd Combat Team. And you know what? Over 3,000 of us idiots got the Purple Heart. You can't figure that out, Major, can you?
No. That's what I don't understand. They call you dirty Jap rats, and yet you fight for them. Why?
I've got some hot infantry news for you. I'm not a dirty Jap rat. I'm an American. And if we get pushed around back home, well, that's our business. But we don't like it when we get pushed around by... knock off before I forget the articles of war and slap those rabbit teeth of yours out one at a time.
It's something that a white audience in the early 50s might not have considered. 1951 was the year where the class action lawsuit that would become Brown v. Board of Education was filed, and 6 years removed from the shameful period of Japanese internment that was being hastily swept under the rug. Although the attitude shared by Edwards and Liu's characters boiled down to an agreeable, keep a stiff upper lip along the slow march of progress. At this point in the 50s, having 2 fleshed-out non-white characters directly address the hypocrisy at the core of the American project was somewhat groundbreaking.
You pay for a ticket, but you even have to sit in the back of a public bus. Isn't that so?
That's right. 100 years ago, I couldn't even ride a bus. At least now I can sit in the back. Maybe in 50 years, I'll sit in the middle. Someday even up front. There's some things you just can't rush, Buster.
You're a stupid man.
You're the stupid Joe. Why don't you get wise, Buster?
The film is also very forward-thinking in how it explores faith. Short Round is not just an adoptive son to Zack, but also a spiritual guide for a man for which combat has stripped him of any sense of spirituality. The fact that the executioner's bullet bounced around in his titular helmet and never pierced his skull is a miraculous circumstance, and quietly, through all his bluster, we see him slowly come to terms that perhaps a higher power is watching over him. And it all plays out in subtext, with only a looming Buddha statue signifying, "This is what the movie is actually about." For an all too brief time, this boy and these men, all from vastly different backgrounds, come together in tranquil fellowship, inside a holy place of worship. However, instead of giving Zack a clean redemption through spiritual awakening and surrogate fatherhood, the film takes a dark turn that gives it an ambiguous yet nonetheless moving ending. At the end, Sergeant Zack's path to enlightenment has only just begun, and shedding the steel helmet, that symbol of his survivor's guilt, is the first step on that journey. I always thought that Bridge on the River Kwai and Paths of Glory set on a cinematic fault line in 1957, between the raw patriotic old Hollywood war films and the more cynical films of the Vietnam era. The steel helmet, in a way, is an even earlier prelude to the edgier tone of those movies. Americans commit war crimes, are called out for it, and subsequently face no punishment. The US Army wasn't too pleased with that depiction, though according to Fuller, executing POWs was a common occurrence during his service in the European theater. This was the first Korean War movie ever made, and Fuller set an unflinching tone that separated it from the war movies made during the previous conflict.
He was a maverick filmmaker who depicted the human condition as it was, unsightly warts and all, at a time when the US military thought they could steer the movie industry to make propaganda like they did in the 40s.
The rules had changed in the Cold War. Conflict was never as cut and dry as it had been against the Nazis and the Japanese Empire. As the nation dove into the morally murky depths of Vietnam, the steel helmet serves as a quiet opening salvo to a more introspective type of war film.